Monsters in role-playing games are probably the number one thing that a DM will use to throw up against the players. Some can be challenging, others not so much, but the monsters that players will face in Dragonbane, well, this video is going to explain that. GameMasters here, and in most combat scenarios, when it comes down to players versus monsters, the monsters have a chance to miss the player. Dragonbane doesn't, you won't... How should I put this? When a monster attacks in Dragonbane, it doesn't roll dice to see if it hits you or not. It automatically succeeds. A good rule of thumb, should you see a monster, is to ask yourself, is it worth it? Dragonbane concentrates heavily on role-playing. Combat is certainly a part of it, but you're going to want to use tactics and smarts when going up against any given monster. Monsters have what is called monster attacks, and I'll show some of those examples in a moment, but when a monster attacks, that's considered its action. Some monsters have what is called ferocity, which means that they get multiple actions per round. Monsters, just like in other games, can range in size, from small all the way up to huge. Small monsters are less than a meter tall and are not able to block, and they can move through narrow and tiny passages. Normal-sized monsters are more or less the size of your average human. They can block an area that measures 2 by 2 meters and can pass through passages that are about half a meter wide. Large monsters are able to block an area that is 4 by 4 meters and can only move through passages that's about 1 meter wide or larger. Huge monsters can block an area of up to 8 by 8 meters in size and can pass through passages that are 2 meters wide or larger. And I point out those passage sizes because going back to the question, you got to ask yourself, is it worth it? Sometimes you got to know where your exits are and if that monster can actually move after you. Speaking of movement, monsters have a movement score that dictates the distance that they can move per turn. And again, I'll show you an example when we look over some of the stat blocks in just a moment. But know that a monster can split its movement up should it want to. This means that it can move for part of its score, attack, then spend the rest of its movement score to advance closer to its next target. Of course, it can also spend all of its movement and then attack if it chooses. As mentioned, monsters will use their monster attack when they, well, attack. Each monster in Dragonbane has a unique set of monster attacks, which is depicted in a table within its stat block. The DM can either roll randomly or pick a specific attack of their choice. For example, a giant spider has 6 possible attacks. Rolling a 1 means that it will attack with mandibles. Its long serrated mandibles swish through the air like scimitars, and this inflicts 2d8 slashing damage. Remember, when a monster attacks, it doesn't roll to see if it hits, it just automatically succeeds. Again, ask yourself, is it worth it? Some monsters can inflict what is called a condition onto a player. This would be something like being dazed or scared. I covered conditions in another video, but the basics of them is based on the type of condition you are suffering. You'll get what is called a bane to your rolls. A bane is similar to rolling with disadvantage in Dungeons & Dragons. You'll take 2 20-sided die, roll them, and take the higher of the 2 numbers as you roll. Remember, in Dragonbane, the objective is to roll low, so taking the higher number, that's not a good thing. As a side note, if you'd like to know more about how dice work, I did a video on that, so be sure to check that out. A monster will never make the same attack twice in a row. You can attempt to dodge a monster's attack, but generally their attacks cannot be parried. Although some attacks might be able to be parried, but that's in a specific instance, and if it can, it will specifically say that it can be parried. All monsters can dodge, and those that carry weapons can also parry your attacks. I know. Seems a little unfair that monsters can parry your attacks, but that you can't parry theirs. Again, is it worth it? Some of the monsters in Dragonbane have natural armor. A lot do not, but those that do can subtract the armor rating from the damage that they take. For example, if I hit a dragon for 5 points of damage, it has a natural armor of 6, so I'd actually not do any damage to it at all. But there is an optional rule that if your weapon has piercing, that you can use it to find a weak spot in the monster's natural armor. You can attempt to topple a monster. You can get a bonus roll, a bane, Dragonbane's version of rolling with advantage, if you attempt to topple a monster that has 4 or more legs. You cannot disarm monsters, nor can you grapple them. Monsters, unless otherwise noted, can see in darkness, and do not suffer from the darkness condition, which means that one cannot make a dash or hit with a ranged attack. Some monsters are resistant to specific types of attacks. For example, A skeleton has resistance to piercing. This means that should you attack with it, a weapon that has piercing, the damage is halved. Some monsters have immunity to certain types of attacks, and we'll again look at the skeleton as it is immune to fear, so attempting to cast a spell that causes fear at a skeleton, that'd be kind of pointless. Most monsters are also immune to tactics of persuasion, unless otherwise stated. Now, who wants to check out some monster stat blocks? Brace yourself. If you're used to the stat blocks from Dungeons & Dragons, the ones in Dragonbane are very different by comparison. For example, this is the Wight from D&D's 5th edition, and while it lists out all its attributes, skills, resistances, and a lot more information, it's a lot to keep up with. The same monster in Dragonbane has this stat block. Simple, elegant, and you can easily see how it leaves it open for plenty of role-playing. Breaking it down to what we were talking about earlier, the Wight has a ferocity of 2. Remember, this is the number that represents how many actions the monster gets in the same round. Its size is normal, so it's about the size of a human. It has a movement of 10, and you'll note that its armor listed says same as armor. What this means is that the Wight, being undead, which means that it was once alive, it wears the same armor that it used to wear when it was alive. It's the DM's choice as to what might have been wearing, but they generally will be seen wearing chainmail and wielding a morning star, although the image depicts one that is wearing what looks to be some fancy plate armor and a longsword, which is actually a great way to explain that monsters in Dragonbane's bestiary are the typical ones found, that some might be less powerful, but that others might be even more powerful. Should you want them to be more or less powerful than the ones depicted in here, it's super easy to adjust. You can either increase or decrease its ferocity and hit points. The Wight has 38 hit points and has resistance from non-magical weapons, but it takes normal damage from fire. All monsters have a table of d6 attacks. The Wight has these 6 that, as previously mentioned, the GM can either randomly roll for or pick one that best suits the occasion. Just remember, monsters won't use the same attack twice in a row. Let's say you rolled a 3. The Wight would attack with Hand of the Dead. It raises its hand and flings a player 2d4 meters away. They're considered prone and take 2d4 damage, plus this attack cannot be dodged. Let's also take a look at the dragon's stat block. Dragons have a ferocity of 3. They are huge in size, have a movement of 24, natural armor of 6, and 84 hit points. Dragons also have wings, allowing them to take to the air and, well, fly. Should the GM roll a 6 for the dragon's attack, it will use Fire Breath. The dragon towers over the player characters in all its splendor before unleashing a devastating storm of fire from its mouth. This is a fiery breath weapon in the form of a cone that goes out to 10 meters, with a width at any given point that is equal to the distance from the dragon's mouth. So at 10 meters long, at that point, it's also 10 meters wide. 1 meter back and it's 9 meters wide, then 8 meters, and so on. Any character that is hit with this breath weapon takes 3d10 fire damage, and their armor has 0 effect. Rolling a 4 sees that the dragon makes a tail strike. It sweeps its tail at its enemies, and all characters within 6 meters suffer 2d8 bludgeoning damage and are knocked down. While these are just 2 examples of monsters, there are also animals that you may encounter. Common animals can be found throughout the lands in Dragonbane. These would be cats, dogs, goats, deer, wolves, bears, the list goes on, and there's a table provided that gives the basics for them. For example, the almighty cat has a movement of 12, 4 hit points, and its bite can cause 1d3 damage. You may wonder, how could you roll a 1d3? Well, it's simple. Just use a d6. 1 and 2 is 1 damage, 3 and 4 would be 2, and 5 and 6 would be 3. You'll also see that the cat has something called awareness with a score of 12, evade with a score of 14, and sneaking with a score of 16. Awareness, evade, and sneaking are all core skills, and we'll check those out in another video. A bear, by comparison, has a movement of 12, 20 hit points, and its bite does 2d8 damage. Oh, before I forget, the base rulebook of Dragonbane has the following monsters listed in their bestiary: demon, dragon, ghost, giant, giant spider, goblin, griffin, harpy, manticore, minotaur, orc, skeleton, troll, wight, and vampiric bats, and of course the common animals that we just listed a moment ago. Well, that's 15 monsters and 11 animals. There is an optional supplement book called Bestiary. It's Dragonbane's version of a monster manual. It's a bit over 150 pages long and is chocked full of monsters that range all over the place, from orcs to wargs, from ant people to ancient dragons. While this book is optional, it does include what is called adventure seeds. This is a recommendation to the GM as to what they can use to include the respective monster in an adventure or to craft an adventure around that specific monster. For example, the Naiad. It suggests that a young man from a local village has disappeared by the local lake. Rumors say that he was eaten by a sea serpent, but after investigating, you find that the Naiad have moved into the area. Eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed that when I talked about the skeleton having resistance to piercing damage, there was a line above that in its box that reads, non-monster. Skeletons do not count as monsters in combat, but as ordinary NPCs. This means that skeletons in combat are treated as non-player characters. Now what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you all about NPCs in another video. I want to thank everyone today for watching the video. My name is Brian and I've been running and playing role-playing games since the 80s. If today's video was entertaining in any way, or if you got anything out of it, I'd love to ask that you give it a thumbs up, as that really helps the channel to grow. I also want to thank my YouTube and Patreon supporters, as their contributions to the channel have made it so that I didn't need to take on a sponsored ad for this specific video. And come on, we all skip those anyways, don't we? If you'd like to become a YouTube or Patreon member, I'll leave a link down in the description. Contributing patrons over on Patreon get access to some fun adventure goodies, so be sure to check that out. Also be sure to check out my Discord. It's lively with all kinds of nerdy conversation, but too, I use it to get feedback direct from you, the viewer, as to what you'd like to see next. So if you'd like to help shape this channel and its future, be sure to jump into the Discord and join the conversation. I am having a blast with these Dragonbane Basics videos, and I hope that they're giving you some good insight as to how the game itself is played, but also how different and simple it is compared to other more crunchy tabletop role-playing games. I'm excited to explore the Dragonbane landscape with you, and if there's anything specific you'd like to know about it, please don't hesitate to make a comment below. Again, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and until next our paths cross, may you not get caught up in a 10 meter by 10 meter cone of a dragon's breath weapon.